Alright, hello everyone. I'm going to try to keep lab 3 a little shorter just to cut down on the size of these files. So let's get right into it. So coffee weed is another one of our legumes. You know that from the rounded leaves, and these are going to be a lot bigger leaves than a lot of the legumes that we're seeing. So if you see these big round leaves, and especially these, pods that are so associated with legumes, it's pretty safe to assume it's going to be our coffee weed. Alright, we move on to the common mullein or great mullein. These are very tall plants. They have very soft leaves, almost woolly, I suppose. And so you can have them just close to the ground, very small, or you can have them with this huge seed stalk. They can get very tall. Here's a picture of me with one. I am 6'3", if that gives you any indication just how tall these guys can get. Alright, so our hoary mountain mint. I have not seen this since the lab. We looked at it first, but it is going to smell like mint, and it's going to have that flower bud characteristic of mint, and these leaves that really taper off in the end, round, taper off, and they're going to be opposite each other going down the stem. And it's going to have that pale green, just like you would expect with a mint plant. Alright, so Kumarawea. It's called Korean or common Lespedeza, but I remember it as Kumarawea because it is no longer classified as a Lespedeza like our Sericea Lespedeza is. And so it's going to have tiny little rounded leaves, and this is going to be probably coming in a clump. It grows very close to the ground, and it's vines out all over the place. Couple labs back, I brought in like a huge clump, but it can also just come in little strings of Kumarawea. Alright, so pineweed. This is another rare one. It likes to grow in sandy soil, and it's going to have, it's going to come in sort of like this big clump, right, of these things that it's called pineweed because they sort of remind of pine needles, I guess, or like evergreen needles. It's going to be very scaly and feel scaly like those. So if it comes in a big clump and looks like it could have been a pine tree that was just yanked out of the ground, that's a pretty safe bet that it's going to be our pineweed. Alright, smartweed or knotgrass, not to be confused with our stiltgrass. It's going to have a thicker stem than that stiltgrass and smaller leaves, right? But there's going to be another one of those invasives. It can just grow anywhere, and it will typically stay sort of close to the ground. Alright, so then these grasses from that third lab. So the the broom sedge blue stem. This is one of those grasses where, again, you're probably going to see a bunch of them together because they're going to be growing like this when they're small and like this when they get a little older. It's hard to just get one stalk. As they do get to this part of the year, they're going to have those little white tufts. Big clump of grass, and this is one that a lot of you have been really good at getting in our reviews. Alright, Dallas grass. This is going to be another one of our paspalums, along with that Bahia grass, Vasi grass. And so what's going to be different with this one, same seed head, right? Same type of seed head as those other paspalums, but they're typically going to be much more by themselves. They're not going to be drooping the whole plant over like in Vasi grass. They're not going to be making a peace sign like Bahia grass. They're just going to be coming out opposite the stalk, and they're going to be much more solitary little guys. Alright, plume grass. So if you see plume grass, silver plume grass, it's going to be a very tall grass with that big tuft of silver, cottony, fibrous material at the top. We don't have any other grasses that really look too much like this one, so yeah, if you see a tall grass with that silver fibrous material at the top, you can be pretty safe in saying it's plume grass. Excuse me. Alright, so split-bearded blue stem. is our other blue stem that we learned in this week. So broom sedge, right, it's going to come in that big clump, and sometimes it can have the white tufts, but make sure you know that split beard, right, it looks like, you know, an old man's beard, and it's split. And you can see it, I know it's not a very big picture, but you can see it pretty well here, where it sort of like splits off, right, and it's going to be much more of like a haywire little white puff on our split beard. Alright, so now we have our wood oats, our wild oats, and so unlike our spike uniola or our slender wood oats, these are the ones that are going to have that big seed head, right, that looks like a grain. I sort of think it looks like a trilobite. That's just me being weird though, likely. And so these are, if you see these sorts of seeds, right, you'll know it's wood oats, sea oats, wild oats. They have a lot of names. Alright, American holly was the only holly we went over. It is an evergreen, has these leathery, spiked leaves. Sometimes we'll have the red berries, and it is one of our tree species. But if you see a spiky, leathery tree leaf like this, right, it's going to be American holly. Only holly we covered this semester. Alright, winged sumac. So winged sumac has those leathery leaves. They're going to be coming out either side, one at the top. Make sure you know the difference between this and that China berry, as I talked about in the last video. Those can get a little confusing. Winged sumac, and maybe not this time of the year, but a lot of sumacs will have these orange little fruits on them, but I'd be working on learning them from the leaves and stems. Alright, so then we have our red cedar or eastern juniper. These are going to have a very nice smell to them, and they're also going to be our only cedar that we covered this semester. They'll have the juniper berries and scaly needles or leaves like most of our coniferous plants. And also probably the only conifer that I think you'll be seeing. So if you see something that looks like it could be a conifer, it's either going to be an actual conifer in our red cedar or our pine weed, as I just talked about earlier. Alright, so this one was, I messed up. We did cover this plant week 1, and this is the sawbriar. We talked about the round green briar in the previous video, and so you can see this one has that spiky green stem, just like the greenbrier, but instead of having a round leaf, it has this one that's shaped a little bit more like an arrowhead. And same leathery leaves, and yeah, same spiky stem. Alright, so now we get into just our normal wild grapes, the ones that are not V. rotundifolia or muscadine. And so you can see with all of these, they're not going to have that perfect round heart shape, right? This one sort of looks like a heart. See how I said that they would go out more in one direction or another? This particular species is slightly longer. This one won't look exactly like a heart. It has this big divot right here. This one's much smoother than that rotundifolia. Things like that. And so, but as long as you know what your muscadine leaf looks like, if there was another wild grape, it'll be all right, as long as you're comfortable with that muscadine leaf. Let's see, and here's that muscadine again. That really round, equal height to width and heart-shaped, and it has these very pronounced lobes, which you're really not going to see so pronounced on any of our other common species. It's got these big spikes. Alright, that was a faster one. That was Lab 3. So we're going to end that here. Always feel free to reach out with any questions you have.